Hi guys, today we're going to talk about the American ideas of democracy, that is, the ideas that are consistent with American democracy and that are widely held by Americans. So while many of the democratic ideas and beliefs Americans hold are not exclusive to the United States, they are common among a large majority of Americans. Many of the values that Americans hold most dear are the product of the United States history. It is true that the scope of government has changed throughout time, but Americans hold on to many of the most basic ideas present at the founding of the United States. The point that regardless of political affiliation, most Americans hold these values is an important one, especially when we discuss the American political spectrum and party identification. What you see surrounding the bickering between political parties is an underlying belief that their proposed plan is the best way to uphold these treasured values. Americans often pride themselves on living in the land of the home and the land of the free and the land of opportunity. And it's this American belief that the values of liberty, equality, and democracy are ideas that promote such well-being and happiness. The first common belief in American democracy is the belief in liberty. And the concept of liberty is present throughout many of America's founding documents, including the Declaration of Independence, where Thomas Jefferson proclaimed that all men are granted the inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Likewise, the Constitution provides an explanation on the purpose of the document, which includes securing the blessings of liberty. One belief in liberty that Americans hold dear is the idea of limited government, or that government cannot stretch its powers beyond those that are stated in the Constitution. In the American system, limited government is essential for maintaining liberty. A second belief in American democracy that's widely held is personal freedoms, and those personal freedoms that are protected by the Bill of Rights. So this is another aspect of liberty, and that is of utmost importance, is the concept of personal freedom. These are basically the freedoms granted by the Bill of Rights, and they include freedom of speech, press, and assembly, freedom from religious persecution by the government, freedom of unwarranted searches and seizures, among other things. Another key belief in American democracy is the idea of economic freedom. And this is another aspect of liberty that really has its roots in American founding. That is, the individual's rights to enjoy the fruits of their labor and be able to excel economically as far as their talents will provide. What such beliefs have led to is the belief in the free market capitalist system. And while presently our economy is not strictly free market, as there are governmental regulations on a variety of markets, there's still a strong capitalist vein that runs through the United States populace. In the first century or so after American independence, Americans embraced the idea of laissez-faire government as a laissez-faire approach to the economy. And government regulated very little, and there was little government intervention in the economy. And as time has progressed, many Americans have come to believe that government should act on behalf of the public good through the regulation of food safety, workplace regulations, and banking regulations. All right. Despite this, the idea that capitalism and democracy are a perfect fit still is a prominent belief. All right, the next concept in American democracy is the belief in equality. And again, since America's founding, there's been a commonly held belief in equality. The Declaration of Independence stated that it was a self-evident truth that all men are created equal. the idea of equality is not as well defined as the idea of liberty, and there's still significant discussion on what equality looks like and what it means. The common consensus is that equality refers to equality of opportunity, and there is little argument that all men and women should have equal opportunities to be successful and happy. As I say this, I can already hear the outcries of the various groups that have been marginalized throughout history and the various groups that continue to face unequal circumstances. This is the trouble with the idea of equality. The trouble is, many believe that in order to ensure one person's equality, it could mean sacrificing another person's liberty. So that creates quite a predicament. Also, there are different types of equality, and there is little debate that all are entitled to political equality. That is, that all people who meet qualifications should be allowed to vote. But the question of political equality also gets tricky when we bring up the issue of money. So money plays a significant role in politics, as we'll discuss later in the course. And do those with more money have an unfair political advantage? And this is a question I'm not sure I have an answer to right at the minute. Other types of equality that are discussed are social and economic equality. These facets of the concept of equality tend to carry less weight, as many Americans maintain that anyone can get ahead with enough hard work. Americans tend to hold a belief in bootstrapping, and many hold a more social Darwinist view that the socially and economically disadvantaged are likely there through some fault of their own. I am by no means saying that all Americans hold this view or that I hold this view, but it is a common belief in American thought. All right, so the U.S. Constitution rests on the idea of popular sovereignty. That is, that a government's power comes from the people. So participation in a democratic government like the United States can vary greatly from participation in protests to writing your representatives or attending town hall meetings. But generally speaking, we tend to view participation in the lens of voting. We gauge political participation in whether or not people vote. Another important aspect of American democracy is the idea that the U.S. is a majority-rule minority state. That is, the U.S. governs by taking direction from the majority, but the rights of the minority groups are also protected. So, we're going to talk now about some problems with contradicting values. The different values Americans hold dear often contradict each other. We've already discussed one instance. Another example is the idea of minimum wage. The minimum wage is designed to protect workers and ensure they make a decent living, but governmental regulation can cut into a business's profits, and many argue that minimum wage is contradictory to economic freedom. Other contradictions we will discuss further in the course is the idea of freedom and security, that as many argue we have to surrender the freedom of privacy to ensure our security. Well, that's it for today, so we'll see you next time.